You were born in Australia, you've acted professionally for decades, and you're now a provincial politician in Nova Scotia. Can you fill in a few of those blanks for me, please?
Wow. Well, I was thinking about it the other night. I've been an actor professionally for 30 years, 33 years. I started when I was 15 in high school musicals. I became a professional at the age of 17. I auditioned for the local Neptune Theatre in Halifax, which is a professional company, and they took me on the spot, and I started doing theatre in my summers between my high school years. And then by the time I went to York University in Toronto, I had my actor's equity because I'd done 3 professional shows. And partway through university, I did an audition for the Charlottetown Festival in PEI and was chosen to understudy Anne in Anne of Green Gables. And then I was kind of discovered at the Charlottetown Festival by an author from Toronto who'd written a rock opera on the life of Marilyn Monroe. And they were looking for the right actress to play Marilyn from the age of 16, when she was Norma Jean, to 36, when she died of an overdose of pills and alcohol. And I did a song at this concert that this gentleman saw. His name is Cliff Jones. And I did like a Marlene Dietrich imitation of a Barbra Streisand song from the musical Funny Girl. And he and his wife turned to each other in the audience and said, "That's Marilyn." And so I was flown out to Edmonton. I auditioned for Peter Coe, the artistic director out there, who he had done Oliver on the West End of London and on Broadway. And he hired me on the spot. So next thing you know, I'm 19 from Truro, Nova Scotia, and going to be playing this huge role of Marilyn Monroe in a rock opera on the life of Marilyn Monroe. And when I came out on stage opening night, the 2,000 strong audience jumped to their feet and gave me a standing ovation, and the newspapers across Canada all said, "A star is born," basically. And that was the beginning of my real career. I got movie offers, television offers, all kinds of offers from around the world. And that's what, then I embarked on my basically 30-year career. And in the end, I ended up doing a lot of movies and television, a lot of animation. And in the end, by the time I was about 48, 47, I was tired of saying other people's lines. I wanted to say something myself to the world about what's going on and what I felt about the world. So I wrote a play called The Marilyn Tapes, which was a one-woman show about Marilyn Monroe. And I did it at the Neptune Theatre, and then I took it to New York, and I did it for a year off-Broadway. Got a great review in the New York Times, had many, many interesting people come and see it. And a lot of political people, like Democrats, really enjoyed it because it was kind of a treatise on the McCarthy era as well, the 1950s McCarthy era, when she was married to Arthur Miller, and the House of Un-American Activities Committee was basically locking people up and blacklisting people, and her husband was on that list, and she stood up for him. And so my foray into politics started there. After I'd done the play for about a year, I realized that it was time for me to come home to Nova Scotia. I'd done pretty well everything I wanted to do. I'd starred in a movie called Babyface that was at the Cannes Festival in France. I'd done off-Broadway shows. I also did Unidentified Human Remains and the True Nature of Love by Brad Fraser, who's a Canadian playwright, in New York as well at the Orpheum Theatre. Did that one for about a year, and also in Chicago. And, it was just time to come home. And when I came home, I decided I wanted to support the youth in Nova Scotia and teach a new generation of young artists that you can be successful, and it doesn't matter where you come from, whatever little town or village, how much money you have or don't, what your parents do or don't. If you have the desire and the dream and the dedication and the discipline, you can make anything happen. And that was my message when I moved home. So I started working with youth, just basically volunteering at the beginning. And then I also started getting interested in certain things like the environment I've always been interested in, but I started speaking out on different environmental things and saving a beautiful old heritage building here in Truro called the Normal College, which the town was talking about tearing down. And I said, no, like turn it into something for the community, like a school for performing arts or a library or something. Well, and I raised about $52,000 to do a feasibility study to prove that if they use it for something really artistic and cultural, that it would create a downtown that was vibrant, where people would be coming and going, and that could be the gemstone in the crown of our downtown region. And sure enough, fast forward, that's what has happened. So while I was doing all of this work, the NDP happened to be watching me, and they contacted me and said, listen, we've been watching you do all this work. You're back home now. Have you ever thought about running for politics? And I said, well, I had thought about it over the years, but my acting career came first. Plus, I figured if I was ever going to go into politics, I would need to be older. I'd need to have some gravitas, because as a younger woman, I didn't think that people would give me the respect and listen to what I had to say. Whereas if you're older, you've got experience, you can talk from experience. And so I said, why would you like to know? And they said, well, we have a provincial election coming up in about a year's time, and we wanted to know if you'd run. So I said, well, let me think about it. And I think I let them know in around like January or February of 2009 that I'd thought about it and would be interested in doing it. And the election was called in June 9th. And then I ran and I won in a landslide. So I've won 3 terms now, and this is my 10th year now, and it's really been a roller coaster, but it's been exciting.
And so you came from Australia with your family?
Yes, with my mom and dad.
How old were you at the time?
I was 8. I was 8 years old, yeah.
Why the move?
Well, the year we came over was 1968, actually, and that particular year, Canada put out an offer to Australian teachers to come to Canada to teach because they did not have enough teachers. And in Australia, we had too many. So my mom and dad heeded the call, and we sailed over on a boat on the SS Canberra with 2,000 Australian teachers. And we all emigrated to Canada. We went to Regina, Saskatchewan first. So Dad had a job there actually at the University of Regina, and my mom taught junior high school. So we had a year in Regina first. We'd never seen snow before. And it was very exciting for us. And then we heard how beautiful Nova Scotia was. And we figured, well, we're all the way over here. Let's check out Nova Scotia. And they got jobs here right away. So then we drove across country and we camped all the way and got to see this amazing country. And we moved to Nova Scotia, and that's it. We never left.
I don't notice an accent, an Australian one.
Yeah. Well, when I went to York University, one of the things that the teachers in the drama department noticed was that I had an Australian accent. So some of them were British, and the voice teacher was British. And they said, okay, Lenore, if you're going to get work as an actor in Canada, you got to get rid of your accent. So he taught me to say things like down and out, instead of down and out, g'day, 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 good on you, mate. Australians are very lateral. I think we smile a lot, I don't know. And he was like down and out. So I practiced that. And interestingly enough, I started getting roles, as an American. So Marilyn Monroe was American. And Marilyn Monroe was American. And many of the roles that I ended up getting and have continued to get are American, which is interesting. So I never really picked up a Canadian accent either. It's kind of mid-Atlantic.
So you had your Australian accent up until university?
Yeah.
And so it's now just your permanent accent, or do you slip up at times, or do you have to really think about it?
No. The only time an Australian accent comes in me is if I'm around Australians. If I'm talking to an Australian, it will slip back in, or if I'm over visiting home in Australia, it will slip back in. But in Australia, my family there thinks I sound American.
That's interesting. So you actually no longer have it.
No.
This is how you normally sound.
This
you don't
is the way
have
I
to think
normally
about
sound.
it.
No. My mom and dad still have an Australian accent. But it's interesting, too, because I just did a movie with an actress from Australia, and we were talking about how it's so easy for us to do Southern accents. So I don't know what it is, but Southern accents just come naturally to me. I don't know why. But maybe it's something to do with being Australian originally. I don't know what it is. And the interesting thing is Rogue on the X-Men, of course, was Southern. So when they asked me to come and audition for that character, it was just like night and day. It was like just slipping into another outfit. It came so naturally to me. And again, I booked that job on the spot too. I just walked in, I did a few lines. It was the callbacks. I didn't go for the first auditions. I just showed up for the callbacks, and they went, don't let her leave the studio. That's the voice that we've been looking for. So, yeah.
I wonder, how did your family react to you losing your accent?
They didn't really notice. It happened gradually. So I don't even know when exactly it disappeared, really, to be honest. I don't remember.
Tell me how you ended up voicing the role of Rogue, please.
Okay. So, my agent in Toronto told me that there was a new project that these Americans were going to be auditioning people for. And she said it didn't have a name. It was just called the X Project at that time. And it was a cartoon series. I'd never really done much cartoon before. I think I might have done one cartoon show. But at that point in time, cartoons weren't as popular as they are now. There was a whole bunch of actors who mainly only did cartoons, and then there were the rest of us who did, movies and television or theater, and some of us were lucky enough to do both. And I was of the latter. So I wasn't exactly excited to go and audition for this animation series. I just thought, it would be extra money kind of thing. But when I went into the booth and they showed me a copy of the picture of the character and just said, do whatever you think she might sound like, but they wanted a sexy, husky voice with a Southern accent. And it was the callbacks. They had not found the right actress to play this character. Kind of like the Marilyn Monroe thing that happened to me earlier in my career. They'd searched and searched and hadn't found the right person until the author happened to see me in Charlottetown do that musical audition or performance, and he went, "That's Marilyn." Well, same thing happened here. The producers from Fox and Saban Entertainment were in Los Angeles. They were on the headphones, and I was in the booth, and they could hear the auditions. And they had like a little paragraph that they wanted you to do. And my agent had said, "Lenore, you got to be there for these callbacks, because the reason they haven't found the right actor yet is because it's you. I know it's you. Just get there." So I did. And when I arrived, I took a look at the drawing of the character, and I went in the booth and just said, my daddy liked to kill himself when he found out I was a mutant. I remember when I was 13, I had me a boyfriend. Till I kissed him. Poor boy went into a coma for 3 days. It got so if I touched anybody, it just drove the life right out of him. I don't know, Beast. What makes us like the way we are anyway? So that's basically word for word my audition, and some lines from one of the shows. And I heard the guys in LA going, "Oh my God, that's the voice of Rogue we've been waiting for. Don't let her leave." And but before I left the studio that day, I had the part. And we didn't know what the show was, but when we went in for the first few days of recording, they brought us all in together as a team, kind of like a radio drama. So we all got to know each other, we got to meet each other, and it was kind of scary because one of the girls playing Storm, they kept pushing her to change her voice and do different things with it than she'd done. And eventually they let her go. And I think they let a couple of other people go and replace them too in that first little while. And then that character of Rogue, they changed, not Rogue, sorry, Storm, they changed her a few times. So all of us were a bit on tenterhooks that were we going to be let go too. You know, they say to us to be a little bit stronger on the accent, or now do less of the accent. Same with Gambit. Gambit had to be that Louisiana drawl, and they wanted a strong accent, then they didn't want an accent. The same with the Canadian character of Wolverine. So, you know, so they were playing around and stuff like this, and so we were really nervous in the beginning, but then as they settled down with the characters that they had and the actors that they had, we became a real family. And we were surprised and amazed when the show premiered, I think it was October 31st. I think it premiered on Halloween 25 years ago. Like, we just are celebrating our 25th anniversary. And the show became a humongous hit, which none of us saw coming. And it continued to grow and grow and grow until it became this global sensation. And it still is today. So, you know, I'm proud that I was part of that show. I'm honored that I was made part of that show. And I can really relate to the character. And I also love the stories that Stan Lee created and that Marvel created. I think that they have a great deal of depth and that they have a universal appeal because, like many myths, like the mythology of old times, people around the world can relate to the underbelly of the stories and what it's really saying about life in civilization today.
And logistically, how did it work? Did you go to a different city to record it, and were all the actors there at the same time to record it?
Well, we were all from Toronto. Like, all of us were living in Toronto. So the entire X-Men team were Canadian actors, and we all happened to be living in Toronto at that time. So they'd call us into the studio, and we would just go in, and like I said, it was basically like a radio drama. We would stand around in the room when it was our scenes, and we would do the scene. We'd go through the scene. We'd do it once, we'd do it twice, sometimes we'd do it 3 times. Sometimes you'd punch in, you'd say, stop, okay, let's do that one again, try it a few different ways. And then that would be that scene. Then they'd do the next scene with the other characters. So it was like a play, like a radio drama, and it was fun that way because we got to really build on what each other was giving, as opposed to acting in a silo, which sometimes you can do in an animation series if you're just doing your stuff by yourself.
And did you record like one episode each time, or did you record them all kind of in a row?
No, we just do like one episode at a time.
Over the course of like how many?
4 years.
Like how long would one season take to record?
I can't really remember, to be honest. I don't remember. I don't know. But, you know, but it ended up being about 4 years worth of work, which was great. And then, of course, we'd go off and do our other, you know, movies and television and theater and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a special little exercise where we got to be together in this wonderful universe. And then we did our other acting. One of the things that was interesting when they were casting it, and which they told us later, was normally when Americans will do a cartoon series, there's a ton of actors, as I said earlier, who mainly just do animation and voiceovers. And then there's actors who do film, television, theater, and sometimes just some people who just do theater and some people who do film and television. Some of us, as I said, are lucky and we get to do both. film and television and theater. But they wanted this time, instead of cartoony voices, they wanted real dramatic actors. So they didn't want to see the same just cartoon voices. They wanted real voices who can put on a real role that would be in a play or in a movie or a drama. And that's who they cast it with. So that was also a very interesting thing. So they were top of the line actors who were in that show, top of the line Canadian actors, and we worked really well together.
You tweet quite a bit about Rogue on Twitter.
Yeah.
And is it fair to say that you still maintain a strong connection with that character?
Well, it's interesting because for a number of years I kind of let it go, busy with other things. But that series ended up being shown on Netflix, and it had another life, another lease on life with another whole generation of young people who really dig it. They really get into it. And so, and Twitter, of course, is newer than several years ago. So I found that when I did go on Twitter a few years ago, people started tweeting to me about Rogue and tweeting pictures, and they're fans and they love the show, and many of them they love Rogue and they can relate to her. So I found myself responding to them, and they would freak out. They would be like, "Oh my God, Rogue, is that really you?" I'm like, "Yeah, sugar, it's me." And they would just love it. So, I'll do that from time to time. And if someone tweets to say that that I made a difference in their lives or something, then I respond. I get a lot of fan mail too from around the world, and have for some time. A lot of time from young people who are lonely, who feel they don't really fit in with society. They tell me like they're a bit of a misfit or an outcast or a loner, and that nobody really understands them, but they can relate to the X-Men because they feel that, like the X-Men, they're a bit of a mutant, and they love Rogue because she just blast through anything, and they know she's tender and she's vulnerable and lonely on the inside, but she puts on such a bravado and such a big persona, and she's the strongest woman in the universe after all. So they really love and idolize her. So I get a lot of letters.
Debate with that.
Oh, really?
With
about
Dark
the strongest?
Phoenix, maybe.
What's that?
With Dark Phoenix, maybe, in terms of strength.
I'm not sure. Apparently, I've been told a number of times that she's the strongest woman in the universe because she can fly, she can pick up buildings and throw them. I mean, that's what I've been told. So I don't know.
So since the show originally aired back in the 90s, right? How do you think she's aged? These days, people are far more cognizant and are far more critical of how women are portrayed in entertainment and that kind of thing. How do you think she's aged in regards to that?
Well, I think she's a Me Too kind of gal. I think that Rogue, she doesn't put up with guff from anybody. She won't put up with anything. She looks after herself. She's had to learn how to look after herself. She was kicked out of home at a young age by a father who didn't understand her or appreciate her. And she's, wandered around the universe and had to look deep inside of herself to find what it takes to survive and to learn how to come to terms with who you are, and to not let anybody put you down or put your friends down. So she will stand up for her friends too, and I love that about her.
Do you think she was sexualized on the show, or was that kind of just how all the characters were?
Sexualized in what way? The way she was drawn?
I guess, yeah, like she was clearly quite curvy, right? Although I guess you could also argue that everyone was kind of curvy. I mean, Wolverine was this gigantic, like, muscle pulsating character, I guess, right? So do you think it kind of all blended in, or do you think it was a little odd?
No, I mean, I've always been curvy. So I played Marilyn Monroe at the age of 19, 20, and I played her several times since. So I've always been a woman with curves who was almost ashamed of my curves because, you know, it's held up to us that you have to be skinny and like a boy and have no hips and no boobs in some ways. And I am who I am. I've got what I've got. And so I like the fact that she was like that and that she doesn't flaunt it. She just is it. And what I don't like is when people will take that character and try and enhance it even more and give her really, really big boobs and make it, that to me, you don't need to do that. She is sexy and strong as she is, and many of us have womanly figures, and I think we should not be ashamed of them.
What are your thoughts on her portrayal in the film series?
I was disappointed. I was disappointed when they made her. I think the very first movie of the franchise, they took the role of Jubilee and Rogue and they put them together. So the young Rogue that we see in that first film actually reminds me of Jubilee more than of Rogue. The accent isn't very strong. And yeah, they took the sex appeal out of it as far as I was concerned, which I like about that character. And as I said, I think that they were trying to go for a particular age group there. And so they combined those two characters to try and get a younger age group in with all the rest of them. And I think it lost. I think the character lost. And I get that a lot from different fans and reading on different things on Facebook or Twitter and people comments that they make, and I have to agree with them. I would have liked her to see a more womanly, sexy, older Rogue.
How do you do her voice? Is there a particular technique you use, or does it just kind of come naturally?
It just comes naturally, sugar. I don't know what it is. It just comes over me, and she comes through me, just like when I used to do Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe kind of was a natural thing for me as well. There's certain characters, it's me, but just with a different accent or something like that.
Have you ever used her voice to prank call someone or anything like that?
No. The only time I ever have done that is when somebody says, hey, my friend is like a big fan of yours and of the X-Men, and they love Rogue, and it's their birthday or something like that. Would you mind, leaving a message for them on their phone? And I'm like, sure, why not, right? So I'll do it then, but I don't tend to use her for anything other than for serious or for fun.
Have you ever been tempted to use it in a Province House or anything like that?
No. No. Although I'd love to use her strength sometimes. You look about as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, Mr. Premier.
People are going to expect you to do that now.
Bubba?
How would you teach somebody to do that voice?
You can't.
It just comes out.
You either have it or you don't.
So, like, there's a bit of a southern drawl of some sort?
Well, obviously there's a southern accent, but it's the voice quality that is unique, and everybody has their own signature sound, and I have mine, and I don't think you can't just copy it. Like, I know people have tried, but it's not the same. Some people, it's like a thumbprint. You can try and sound like somebody, but some people have a really unique quality to their voices. And in some ways, I think it's like your spirit. It's like your spirit coming through. It's like when you sing. So for instance, I started off doing musicals, right? So when I sing, it's a certain connection that I have with an audience. And if I sing country, for instance, I do Patsy Cline. And it was interesting, my very first election when I ran in 2009, I was here in Nova Scotia. I was asked to come to an open mic night in Bible Hill, where they were doing country music. They had a little band, and everybody would get up and do songs and stuff. And so I went over there during the campaign, and someone said, "Oh, why don't you get up and do a song? Let's hear how you can sing." I said, "Sure, what do you want me to do?" Right? And they were like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, how about Patsy Cline?" Everybody was like, yeah, do Patsy Cline. So I did Walkin' After Midnight. And people loved it. They just went crazy. And the weird thing is, the word went all over town that, hey, she can sing Patsy Cline and she's really good. And when I started going more door knocking and canvassing, I'd go up to a house and they go, "Oh, you're Lenore Zann. You can sing Patsy Cline. I heard about you. You got my vote." I'm like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah, because anybody who can sing Patsy Cline with that realism and that spirit has got to be a good person. You can relate to the people." And I thought that's really interesting. And again, it's about the quality of voice and your soul coming through while you're singing. And when I do speeches or when I speak, I mean, that's me. I'm not putting on a persona. It's just me talking to the people about what I really feel, and I'm not going to lie to them. I'm always going to be telling them like it is. And I think they get that.
Do you have any particular moments in the show that you're most proud of or is most significant for you?
Well, one of my favorite episodes was A Rogue's Tale. That's where you get to see the backstory about Rogue and her struggles with coming to terms with who she is and the fact that she feels like, well, she's a mutant and she's not normal, so they say. But coming to terms and being cast out of her home by the people who raised her, and being not appreciated, not approved of. Everybody's looking in some ways for approval and for love and to belong. And I think in politics as well, it's the same kind of thing. People want to belong, they want to believe in something. Religion, politics, all of these kinds of things. People are looking for, like, as a lot of people are saying, a tribe, but they're looking for a family. They're looking to belong. And many people are cast out and they feel like they don't belong anywhere. And that is rampant throughout society, everywhere. And that's why I feel that show, that particular episode, was so good for me to be able to express that, and people relate to it. And if I can make people feel better about themselves and learn how to appreciate and accept themselves for who they are, then I've done my job.
When was the last time you've portrayed her? Professionally, I guess.
Well, like back in the 90s.
Would you want to portray her again?
Yeah, sure. If anybody, if Fox or any of them want to do, Marvel wants to do another series of the X-Men, please sign me up.
What about real life? Would you ever want to do that?
What do you mean?
Like a real life version of Rogue?
Sure. Why not? Yeah, absolutely. She's a great character.
In regards to your entire career, this might be obvious, but which role has been your favorite?
Well, I would say I've had 3 favorites. My first one was Marilyn Monroe. My second one was Rogue. And then my third favorite role was Candy in Unidentified Human Remains and the True Nature of Love, which I did get to take to off-Broadway in 1990. Actually, I did that before I did Rogue. And when I came back from Chicago and New York, a year in Chicago, a year in New York, that's when I got the part of Rogue. So those 3 characters they're very complicated characters. They're complicated women. They're not just cut and dry. You really have to delve into their psyches, and I love that. That's what I enjoy about acting a lot, is to do the psychology of who are they, what makes them who they are, and how do you express that so that people can relate to it.
Least favorite role?
I don't really have any least favorite roles. I feel like feel grateful that I was able to have a career as an actor, only acting. Sometimes as a young actress, I had to accept roles just to be able to pay for food and rent. But I'm grateful that I was able to keep working and to keep really practicing my craft and honing my craft. So in the 1980s, which is when I started doing movies and television, in Canada we tended to do a lot of horror films in the 80s. And so I became what they used to call like the Canadian Scream Queen at one point in time. And I did a lot of those films where I ended up getting murdered and things like that in different horrendous ways. And, you know, at the time, I would have much preferred to be playing like really good, wonderful, deep roles on a TV series or in a film. But we tended to mainly do a lot of these horror films. So I felt like there was a part of my life that was not, I wasn't able to really show what I could do as much as I would have liked to on film. And they oftentimes would really try and exploit young women with their the bodies and sexuality and stuff like that, and nudity. So I ended up having to do nudity and stuff, which I didn't particularly want to do. But, you know, if you were going to play the role, then that was part of the contract. There was one part in particular, I loved the role. I loved the role. She was a real kick-ass broad, and it was called Visiting Hours with Michael Ironside. And she was like a street girl, a street girl. I think I was 20 when I played the part, so it was one of my earliest films. I did Happy Birthday to Me and I did Visiting Hours the same summer, shot in Montreal, after I'd done the Hey Marilyn show in Edmonton earlier that winter. And I remember there's this one scene where Michael Ironside's character, who's this crazed feminist hater, woman hater, and he's killing all these different people. He's chasing around after Lee, I forget her name now, but anyway, the lead actress. And then he goes after me, and you've seen him murder a bunch of people by this time, so you're expecting her to get murdered. In the end, he rapes her and attacks her, and you don't know if she's dead at the end of the scene, but then she comes back and you realize she got away. Well, in the scene where he has a knife and they said, okay, Lenore, so he's going to rip open your top. Now, I had not signed a contract saying I was going to do any nudity in that film. And on the day, on the set, as this 20-year-old young actress, they tried to tell me, well, you know, we're going to get him to cut your shirt, so we're going to have to show some breasts. I'm like, no, that's not in my contract. And they were like, well, you know, but we need it for the shot. I'm like, no, you know, I don't think so. And they said, well, what do you think we should do? What should you expect us to do then? I said, you mean he's gonna rip open the front of my shirt with a knife? And they said, yes. So we're gonna see your breasts. I said, what about if you just pan up to my face? As the knife is going down, why don't you pan up to my face and show what the woman is feeling, as opposed to showing her breasts, right? And I was only 20, and I had the wherewithal on set to stand up to them with this pressure being put on me to go, no, like, come on, right? And I'm glad I did that. And guess what? It works way better. The scene is way scarier and much more intense, and it shows the woman's perspective. And so I feel proud about that moment and that scene, in spite of the fact of what happened. But those were the kinds of roles that we were given at that particular point in time. So I feel sad that I had to do so many of them, and I would have loved to have gotten a chance to do much more deeper roles. But, you know, again, I was honing my craft. I needed to make a living, and I was making a living as a working actor in Canada.
Do you think putting up that fight may have impacted your career negatively?
No, definitely not. I continued to work, and I mean, in my 20s I worked a lot, as most young actresses do. We work a lot in our 20s. It's when you hit your 30s that it becomes harder. And so, and it's hard to do the transition between all the ages for women. For women, much more than men. Men tend to age into themselves and there's more jobs and more jobs available as they get older, whereas with women, they get fewer and farther between. That's why I always tell young actors and actresses to try and diversify, try and get to be able to do theater, film, television, animation, voiceovers. Try and write your own shows, direct, produce, because that will keep you going and you'll have much more longevity than if you can only do one thing.
Do you think that's changing? Especially, I think it was a couple of weeks now since the last Halloween movie came out with Jamie Lee Curtis in the lead role.
I didn't see it, so I don't really know. I can't say. I do know that back in 1984, I was compared to Jamie Lee Curtis, and I took that as a compliment. We have the same birthday, November 22nd. But I don't know. I can't say. I haven't seen that one. But it's a constant struggle for women to not be sexualized and to try and stand up for themselves. And yeah, I don't think that has changed all that much in some ways.
And what are your thoughts on the Me Too movement?
It's about time, Me too. I also am a survivor of sexual assault. And the first time I actually mentioned it, talked about it, was on the floor of the legislature a few years ago, before the Me Too movement started. And we were passing a bill about past sexual assaults and how far back you can go to be able to take somebody to court. And I got up and talked about how 30 years before I had been sexually assaulted, and it had taken me 30 years to even admit to anybody that it had happened. I'd put it out of my mind. I swept it under the rug. And finally, after trying to sweep so many things under the rug, and then you lift up the rug, there are all these eyes staring back at you, and you go, oh, right, I forgot about that. Maybe it's time for me to deal with it. So I think it's about time, and I'm really glad to see that women are finally putting aside the stigma and the shame that goes with it, unfortunately, where we blame ourselves, partly because society tended to always blame the victim. So I say good on you to all the women who are coming out and telling their story.
If you don't mind me asking, did that assault have to do with your career?
No. Well, earlier, actually, there was an earlier one that was a director who did sexually assault me, but I managed to get out of it, and then it became sexual harassment. It was sexual harassment for the most part. And I was young, and I really didn't know how to handle it at the time, but I managed to keep myself separate from that person and keep my cool and still do my job without even telling the rest of the cast that it was going on. But I would handle it differently today. I would report that person. But back then, I didn't really know how to handle it. And then several years later, when I was in Hollywood, a Hollywood agent he did sexually assault. He came on to me from behind and started biting into my ear and holding my breasts from behind, and I just signed an agreement with him to represent me, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
Your own agent.
Yeah, the agent I had just signed with that day. And I said, look, I'm sorry, but this is just business. I don't know what you're expecting here. Oh, come on, Lenore, He was like, come on, well, yeah, business and pleasure, it's all mixed together. And then I said, well, I have a boyfriend right now. I'm dating somebody. I'm going out with an actor. Like, I shouldn't have even had to explain myself, right? But you start finding yourself coming up with all these excuses, and you shouldn't have to. No means no. And when I said, oh, well, I was dating this actor, he said, oh, well, you're never gonna learn. This is Hollywood. He said, this is Hollywood. He said, going out with an out-of-work actor, that'll never get you ahead. This is an agent who makes his living off actors. I just couldn't believe it. But again, like I was like, I'm sorry, but this is just business. And after that, he took me home, and he never took any of my calls and wouldn't send me out on any auditions. And I had to go for 2 months trying to get him and his company to send me out on auditions. They never would. Finally, I went to the union. I went to SAG, Screen Actors Guild, and said, I need to get out of a contract. How do I do that? And he said, and they said, well, is this because of sexual harassment issues? I'm like, well, why do you ask? And they said, because we're trying to crack down on that right now. And I said, well, yeah, it is, but I don't really want to do anything about it, because I was scared of being blacklisted. This guy was very powerful in Hollywood. He knew everybody. And I said, no, even if you don't do it for yourself, think about all the other young girls that come through here that he must be doing this to, and we want to stop it. So please come and speak to one of our lawyers about what happened so that we can stop it. So when they said that, I said, okay, I would. And I spoke to their lawyer, who was a female, and I said, look, there was nobody there. There was no witnesses. It'll be he said, she said. And she said, yeah, I know. She said, that's what we're used to, but I've heard your story, what happened. Now I'm going to go and talk to him. So she did. And then she called me and said, okay, I've met with him. And I said, right. And he denied it, right? And she said, yep, he did. And I said, so, yeah, that's what I told you. Like, it'll be, he said, she said, so what do you do? She said, well, the difference is I believe you. She said, I believe you. And that meant the world to me, because, again, you want to be believed. And that's why this whole thing where people go, I believe the woman, it's so important, because when you've been abused like that, you feel all alone, and who's going to stand up for you? How do you, these guys are pretty powerful. And if if they assaulted you, or even if you had the wherewithal to be able to get away from them, it's tough. And so she was able to then deal with it. And she said, the other thing she said, like, you're not getting out of this anything. You're not asking for money. All you want is to get out of your contract. So she said, I believe you. So that was a moment where I felt like some of the other abuse that had happened, I felt a little bit better about that. I actually did something and changed the end of the story, so he didn't just get away with it. Yeah, so that was really, really important. But the other one that was a sexual assault happened when I was traveling alone in Europe, and I didn't have any friends or anybody around. I had to rely on the kindness of strangers, and I learned there that there are people who will come out of the woodworks to help you when you need it, and there are also people who will take advantage of you. So you've got to be very careful as a young person, woman or man. You have to be very careful who you trust and let into your life.
How do we go about fixing this? So I think part of it is supporting these victims, who are oftentimes women, right? How do we go about changing that culture, ending it, stopping it from happening to begin with, and also getting women to speak up about it?
Well, I think the door has opened now for women to be speaking up about it. But now what we need to do is also teach our boys to really respect women, and that no means no, to treat women equally. Because unfortunately, a lot of these kinds of issues are power over. It's a way of control. It's violence. They've got to learn it's violence, and it's against the law, and that they will be prosecuted if they do something that is not permissible by the woman. So I think that part of the issue is we have to train our young men as well to not be bamboozled and blinded by some of the stuff that they see on games, on television, in porn. I think porn has a big deal to do with it. And, it's the choice between looking at a woman's breasts or looking her in the eyes. And I think you need to teach people, men and women, boys and girls, that you want to get to know each other on an equal basis and in a with mutual respect and kindness and compassion. And that's the excitement about a relationship, not just trying to coerce somebody to give you something that you think is going to fulfill you, which is really just a very short-term moment of satisfaction. And it's going to leave you empty in the end.
Do you think you've ever been a perpetrator of anything like this, either harassment or assault?
No. And to be honest, we were talking about racism. Like, racism is a very important issue too, I believe, right now. Like the intersectionality of people of color, people, indigenous folks. It's really important to learn to respect everyone, and it doesn't matter what the culture or skin color or religion or country is. I think that people like populist leaders like Donald Trump and those others are really doing a disservice to our society right now by whipping up all of these base elements within people, a fear of the other. I've always made it my mission, ever since I can remember, to stand up for people who might be being attacked or bullied by others. And if I see any kind of a racist remark or behavior in my presence, I put a stop to it, because I have to. I can't live with myself and let that happen.
What do you have in the works right now?
Well, for the last 9 years, I've been focused on my political activities and my political work. But one of the outlets for my creativity that I created here in Truro was to direct and produce Shakespeare in Victoria Park, which is our beautiful park that's here in the middle of town. I wanted to do Shakespeare for the community and involve teenagers from the high school to junior high school and also local adults to perform in a Shakespeare play. So we've done 5 of them now. It's free for the people to be in it, and it's free for the audience. I believe in public art when you can get it, like if a government can subsidize it or whatever. In my case, I tend to do a lot of the work, and it's been so much fun for them and for me, and it's become really, really popular. We get like over 1,000 people coming to see the shows in the summertime. So it's great for the kids too, because now they get to actually live and breathe Shakespeare instead of just reading about it in a dusty old book in school. So that's been fun. And I just was asked to do a movie recently by Tom Fitzgerald, who did The Hanging Garden. He also did Cloudburst with Olympia Dukakis and a number of other films. And the recent one is called Stage Mother, and it's set in Texas and in San Francisco. And so I play a Texan gal, the sister to the lead character. And Lucy Liu is in it, and several other stars from America. But it's about an older woman living in Texas, in a little Texas town, and her sister and her husband, and they basically are in the church. She runs the church choir. I play the keyboards, the organ for the church. And she finds out that her son, who was always a wonderful little performer, had come out to them that he was gay and moved away to San Francisco because his father didn't approve, and that he has died. And she has inherited a club that he owned in San Francisco, which turns out to be a drag queen club. And so then it becomes this whole thing of what's she going to do with the club and all these other young people that are working there and looking for a mother and needing support and needing approval and love and kindness. And so it's a really interesting film about melding those two worlds, like a small little country, rural, conservative town, and people with, San Francisco and that whole lifestyle. And it's a beautiful film, and I think people will be really moved by it. and it's funny.
When will that be released?
Probably next fall, in September, I would say. I think they're going to try and get it ready for the Toronto Film Festival and then all the film festival circuits. So wherever you are in Canada or the States, keep an eye out for it.
Are there any roles that you think you still need to take on?
Yeah, at some point there's a number of classical roles that I'd really love to do, like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, some Tennessee Williams. I'd love to do some Tennessee Williams, Maggie and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, even like The Glass Menagerie to play Amanda, you know. I'm just waiting for my gentlemen callers to come, you know how it is. The smell of jonquils always reminds me of those gentlemen callers. I mean, you know, there's a number of roles like that would be fun to do at some point in time. And also some Shakespearean roles, some Russian roles, or, you know, some of the classics I'd be very interested in doing sometime, and also more film if they present themselves to me.
In your career, have you ever felt starstruck?
Not really. I mean, when I went to New York, I wanted to do Law and Order, and I wanted to work with Jerry Orbach, and also with the guy Sam Waterston. I wanted to work with both of those men who played the Law and the Order and the original Law and Order. So when I was in New York doing my Maryland show, my own play about Maryland, it was really interesting because I landed a role in Law and Order, and I got to work with both of them. So I found myself at one point on the streets of New York working with Jerry Orbach, and it was freezing, freezing cold, so he invited me into the limousine that they had waiting for him, and we ended up singing show tunes to each other. And so he had been the lead in a lot of these like shows, these plays, The Fantastics and Oklahoma, and oh my gosh, just I think even Guys and Dolls, I think he was in that one at one point in time. But he did a ton of musicals that I had learned as a young kid doing amateur theater. And so I got to be singing with my idol from the musical theater world, and that was pretty cool. Yeah, that was really cool. What I've learned in my career from working with a ton of stars and a ton of people around the world is they're just people. They're no different from anybody else. Some have bigger egos than others. The best actors don't. The best actors treat everybody equally and are kind to everyone. And Jerry Orbach was like that. You know, the same. I've heard stories of people like Paul Newman, who was a wonderful actor, treated everybody equally. A lot of these people started off in theater too, because in theater you learn that, you know, you play a role, but you're all in this together. And I hope that I never lose that. It's important in politics too.
Aside from the ones you've already mentioned, do you have any particular regrets?
Not really. No. I mean, one thing I'm very open about this is that I am an alcoholic who quit drinking 24 years ago. So I'm a sober alcoholic. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I believe it's genetic, and there's no cure at this point in time. So the only way to deal with it is to quit drinking and stay sober. So sometimes I wonder, well, how far could I have gone if I didn't have that disease? But, you know, you play with the cards that you're dealt. And I think life is, you know, you can make a million plans, but life is what happens to you. And it's also how you deal with what happens to you. That's what makes or breaks a person. So I've always felt that my biggest goal in life is to be a great soul. And that is what I try and work towards.
Why the jump into politics?
Well, it started with me writing my own play, The Marilyn Tapes, about Marilyn Monroe, and looking at her life as a smart, intelligent woman, a sensitive woman in the 1950s, trying to make a difference, but being stuck in a certain persona because of her body, really, and being typecast as a dumb blonde. I wanted to show who she really was underneath all of that. And so I wrote my own show where I got to talk about politics, and I got to talk about world peace. I got to talk about, the left versus the right and everything in between. And also got to talk about women and their shape and their body image, and how it's so important to learn how to love yourself despite your body. Many young women are hung up over parts of their body, and what I wanted to teach them was that even Marilyn Monroe, who was supposed to be this beautiful sexual symbol, sex symbol, who everybody thought she was perfect looking, she had everything. She had men, she had fame, she had fortune, but she was never happy, to the point where she died of an overdose and alcohol and pills, and what would cause somebody to do that. So I wanted to teach young women in particular that it's okay to be who you are and to accept who you are, and to learn how to love yourself, because you can't fill up the void, the hole inside of yourself with outer things. Only your own self-love and approval and acceptance can fill that hole. So that's where it started. And it was interesting because I was making political statements of various sorts from behind the facade, the mask of Marilyn Monroe. And it was interesting because a lot of the stuff that people really dug in the play were the political things that I was saying, even the stuff about feminism and women and stuff like this. So when I moved home to Nova Scotia after that, and the NDP asked me if I would be interested in running for politics, when I thought about it, I realized that this would be me stepping out from behind the mask of playing a character and speaking as me, instead of being Rogue or Marilyn or any of the other characters that I've played, and having to always look for projects that I felt might say something that were worthwhile. Now I could actually speak for myself and be myself doing it. So that's what was appealing about it, as well as trying to make a difference and trying to make the world a better place. And that's why I made that leap.
And in that realm, what would your biggest accomplishment be so far?
Well, I think I've certainly moved the dial for people to appreciate and understand a little bit more what a social democrat is. I call myself a social democrat. I always have, being an NDPer, of course, New Democrat. Like Bernie Sanders, we believe in equality of all kinds for financially, and we believe in getting rid of poverty and making the field more even for people, and not letting people get left behind, and not just accepting that poverty is just something you have to accept. Also, the environment, that I've been saying for a long time, that the environment, global warming, climate change is going to be the biggest challenge of our lifetimes. And finally, it's being proved. And even when I used to say it 10 years ago, people would kind of roll their eyes a little bit. Well, now they're getting it. And they're getting it because it's affecting everyday people. So the floods, the fires, the strong storms, bigger than ever. Now people are getting to see the results of what we've been doing to the planet. So I think the more of us that are out there speaking our truth and speaking about these issues, the more it spreads public awareness. So I've been an agent of change in that way. I've also been an agent of change talking about women's issues, talking about zero tolerance for sexual harassment and assault, talking about First Nations, Indigenous peoples, appreciating them, accepting them, respecting them. We are on their land, after all. They were here long before us. And I think that society has a long way to go. There's so much racism that is around, and with deep roots. And we're the colonials. We're the ones who moved here, not them. So I think we have a lot of work to do. And I'm pleased and honored that I've been able to be the critic for like Aboriginal, Indigenous affairs, status of women, the environment, post-secondary education for students. Talking about free post-secondary education, I think, is very, very important. I've lived in Sweden and done a play in Sweden for a year where they had, they have annual, they have a living wage, and they have much more, a better quality of life, better longevity, less hospital visits, because of their social system, which is social democracy in action. So I feel that proud that I've been able to move the needle over. The other thing is to be an artist in government, talking about the creative economy, talking about the importance of film, television, and theater and art and dance. I think that society here in the West has not appreciated the arts as much as they should, and that we need to start putting more money and energy into that as well.
Do you think your career as an actress has influenced how people treat you as a politician?
Yes, in the beginning, for sure. It was almost like, in the beginning, it felt like some people in certain circles were saying, how dare she step out of her little box as an artist? What would she know about politics? Oh, what would an actor know? As if to say actors are just stupid and, unintelligent or something. And meanwhile, most actors that I know are quite brilliant. You have to be in order to get into a character, to understand things, to see the arc of a story. You have to learn and research many, many things depending on what the roles are and the plays are and the movies are that you're doing. And most of us are very well-spoken, obviously, and very thoughtful. And also, I used to say in the very beginning was, well, to be an actor, you have to be empathetic. You have to be able to put yourself into anybody's shoes and imagine what it's like to live their life. So imagine what it's like to be a single mother living in a trailer park with 3 kids. Imagine what it's like to be a businesswoman who's trying to get a business going and needs to hire certain people, and how much you've got to work with and how much you need to invest, how much you need to make. There are so many different aspects to being a politician. And if you don't have empathy, then you have no right in being there, as far as I'm concerned.
And you do have some kind of education in politics, correct?
Yeah, I went to university at York University and studied both drama and poli-sci. So drama and acting and politics have been 2 of my passions for a long, long time.
So did you have a degree in politics?
No, I don't have a degree.
But you kind of studied both,
yes,
I guess. Okay.
Yes.
So what do you have a degree in then?
I don't have a degree.
Oh, you didn't finish it?
No, I got the part of Marilyn Monroe halfway through my university. So, they offered me, I did the show in the summer at the Charlottetown Festival. After my second year of university, I understudied Anne and Anne of Green Gables for the summer, did small parts, and then at the end of that summer, was when I was discovered by Cliff Jones, the author of Hey Marilyn, this rock opera on the life of Marilyn Monroe. And they said, you're perfect. So, to play Marilyn. So that's when they flew me out to Edmonton. I did an audition for Peter Coe, who was the director of Oliver on the West End of London and on Broadway. And he hired me on the spot. So I wasn't able to continue with my studies, but it was doing what I wanted to do. So, and then I had a 33-year career doing that.
Too good to pass up.
Oh God, yes. And the thing about the entertainment industry is they want you young. They want them young. If you don't go with it, I've had so many times in my life where I've had to make an important decision, whether to leap or not to leap. And usually I'll leap. And I'll have faith that I'm doing the right thing. And I haven't really been let down yet.
If you had lost in the last election, your seat, right? What do you think you'd be doing instead?
Well, I would be acting, I'd be writing, I would be, who knows, maybe even being like a persona on television, talking about politics. I would be very interested in that as well. Those talking heads have a lot to say about things, and being part of a majority government, and also, also being in opposition, I've seen a lot and I've learned a lot, and I have my own opinions about what goes on behind the scenes as well as what you see. Kind of like theater that way. There's stuff going on behind the scenes, and then there's the stuff that the public sees. And I've seen it all.
Would you ever attempt to run for a different level of government?
Sure. I mean, I'd be interested in running federally sometime. And in fact, the Jagmeet Singh and the folks in Ottawa have actually already talked to me about that. So that's something I'm going to have to think about and see what happens. I haven't made any decisions yet.
Are we talking the next election, potentially?
Possibly, yeah.
You have run for NDP leadership, Nova Scotia NDP leadership before, not successfully. Would you ever think of running again?
In the right conditions, yes. I plan on doing this for the long haul. I'm 58 years old, and I feel like I've still got a lot to learn and a lot to offer. And, we haven't had a female premier yet, have we? I mean, I always say, aim for the stars and you might get to the moon. In acting and in theater, we always say yes to life. Say yes. Anything is possible. So just be open to anything that comes. Ride with the punches. Go with the punches, And also, you deal with the hand that you're dealt with. So if the hand that you're dealt with suddenly comes up to go in a certain direction, I'm always interested in possibilities.
If you were the center of a political scandal, what would it be about?
Well, I think I already was when I first ran. When I first ran for office in 2009, they announced that I was going to be running in Truro, the NDP, and then 3 hours later, I got a call from the NDP saying, well, batten down your hatches. We just found out that the CBC received a package from the Liberal Party with a picture of you naked from the topless or something like this, and that the CBC is going to run with it at the 6 o'clock news. I was like, what? Like, really? And I said, and who did this? And they said, the Liberals. I said, I couldn't believe the Liberals would do something like that. I said, Pierre Trudeau said, stay out of people's bedrooms. I mean, I was amazed. And they said, well, luckily you have already told us that this could happen, because I said, you fill out these forms, disclosure forms, when you say you're going to run for a party. And they say, have you ever done anything that would embarrass you or the party? So I wrote, well, I've never done anything that would embarrass me, but you ought to be aware that I'm an actor. I did a lot of horror films in the 80s. I have done some nudity. I've done love scenes and on film. And I know that there are also frozen frames from those scenes that people have illegally taken from, they've taken the frozen frames. And at that point in time, they were selling them. Like, they'd have these websites, these closed websites that people needed a credit card to get onto. And they were things like celebrity nudes. So they'd take these frames from different movies that women had done, or people had done, mainly women. And people would have to pay with a credit card to get in and see them. But it was disgusting, really. And totally taken out of context. So I had written, be aware that if anybody was going to try and do a dirty trick and draw me into something, it would be that. So sure enough, that's what it was. But interestingly enough, because I'd already warned the party, the premier-to-be, Darrell Dexter, knew, And so they were able to handle and go, look, she's an actress. I mean, this is the 21st century. That's her job. And now she's going to have a new job. And so they handled it well. And what it did was it actually gave me a soapbox to be able to talk from about the fact that are people aware that by the time a child is like 10 years old, they've seen something like 6,000 violent acts of murder and knife stabbings or whatever on movies, television, games, things like this. And that so therefore nudity in an artistic form is nothing compared to that. I would rather have a child see nudity that was done well than to be seeing a million murders and violence.
And this particular photo was like a screen grab off the L word or something like that?
Yeah, it was a screen grab off the L word, yeah. But interestingly enough, here's the interesting thing. So when they told me about it, I said, oh, well, which picture was it? And they go, well, we don't know. Why? I said, well, there's a few of them. But so anyway, but it turned out to be that one. And interestingly enough, Truro-Bible Hill was the place where our mayor at the time had refused to put up the gay flag, the gay pride flag. So it had become a big issue about that. And so it seemed to me that by showing a picture from the L word, they kept talking about, oh yes, that it was a film about Hollywood lesbians. And they even said that, the liberals. And I'm thinking, so they're trying to play on people's homophobia? Is that why they picked that picture? Which is pretty disgusting as far as I'm concerned. Again, like totally surprised that the Liberal Party would do that. But welcome to politics. And that was my baptism by fire. But again, what it did was it actually brought me higher in the public awareness, and people in my hometown were pissed off that they did that because they'd been watching my career. They knew what I was doing. Everybody knew. So it wasn't like it was a big, oh, aha, did you know she's been, it was like, no, they all knew. The cameras descended on Truro the next day from all the different news networks. And they chased down all these like little old ladies and people to say, well, what do you think about this woman that's going to be running for the NDP here? And I went, what are you talking about? She's an actress. This is the 21st century. Get over it, right? That's her job. To a T, all of them said that. So I was very proud of my hometown for standing up to that and for saying like dirty tricks like that, trying to kneecap somebody in the very beginning is not okay. And I won in a landslide. People in politics will try and find any dirt on anybody to try and give their own candidate a leg up. So if they can be negative and attack somebody, they will. And they'll use whatever means possible. So very much like being an actor, you have to learn to have a somewhat thick skin. It's difficult because many of us are sensitive people, and I don't like it, but I've learned that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and in the theater world, you have to learn to take your critiques and criticisms with a grain of salt. Some people will say you're too this, other people will say you're too that, whatever. It's in the eye of the beholder. So you have to go deep within and have a compass that is a moral compass, that you know that you're doing the best job that you can. You know why you're doing it. And you are performing to the best of your ability. And you have to focus on that and let all the rest of it come and go like noise. And just not take it for granted, not believe everything that everybody tells you about yourself, because you know better than others why you are doing what you're doing and who you really are. When it comes to any of those kinds of attacks on people, I think it's despicable. And I really dislike the American style of politics where it's getting worse, not better. And I would like to see more civility in politics.
Speaking of that, it's kind of an important day, the midterms elections, right?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that and that dynamic?
I'm saying, I sent out a tweet earlier today. Dear American friends, please thump Trump. Please give Trump a thumping and prove that civility and kindness and compassion is more important than division and negativity and racism. And I said, please, from a concerned Canadian citizen, I want to prove that type of politics is not going to take somebody far, and hopefully they'll come and go in one election, and that will be it. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that there's a blue wave in the House at least.
10 years from now, what do you think you'll be up to?
Well, 10 years from now, I believe I will still be an active politician, either provincially or federally. And I intend to keep doing this at least for another 15 years. I feel I'm still young, and I still got a lot more to do. And I think the pendulum swings back and forth between the right and the left. And I find that people need to come together for a balance, and that we need to all look after each other in order to survive, really, in order to survive what's coming and to turn the world into a better place. I think we can do it. And I'm full of positivity about that. I always have been. And I'm not just a glass half full person, I'm a glass full. Why can't we all have it all? There's enough to go around, but we have to act, and we have to act quickly in order to protect this beautiful planet and to learn to love not only one another, but ourselves. And if we can learn to love ourselves and accept ourselves, hopefully we can learn to love others as well.
This was illuminating. Thank you for this.
Thank you.